welcome to the second episode of Draw-Thru Season 1. Since we're still in Season 1, we're still talking about Sonic the Hedgehog. And in this episode, we're focusing on Sonic 2. Now, right off the bat, the difference between Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 are two major things. Quite clearly, that difference is the inclusion of Tails, or Miles per Hour, as his full name is. Yeah, Miles per Hour. It's clever, kind of funny, debatable. Anyway, so Miles per Hour, aka Tails, has his introduction for the first time ever as the first other playable Sonic character in a Sonic game. Although their introduction is not in the game, the manual describes a bored Sonic the Hedgehog leaving his home of South Island to explore West Island where Tails lives. After being stalked by the little fox, they eventually team up when they see that West Island is under the threat of the evil Dr. Robotnik. Evidently, West Island is the true home of the Chaos Emeralds, this time all 7, as the 6 from South Island originally came from West Island, with their additional 7th member being on the island. Now, Dr. Robotnik, of course, wants to get his greedy little hands all over these Chaos Emeralds because they hold an immense amount of power, and he wants them to power his Death Egg. To go back from a story from the previous episode, I did mention that I grew up playing Sonic CD and Sonic 3 and Knuckles. So when I came back to play Sonic 2 for the first time, I was very surprised to see the Death Egg actually had its origins in Sonic 2, although you don't actually see the outside of the Death Egg until Sonic 3, which is kind of a bummer because Dr. Robotnik's face on a giant metal sphere is actually pretty funny looking. Anyway, Emerald Hill Zone is honestly a retread of Green Hill Zone. This set the trend for having a beach / super green, super blue, super happy first level of a Sonic game being the status quo of essentially every Sonic game afterwards. Just like before, it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and it allows you to explore Sonic's moveset without much punishment or without much challenge. Essentially, it's to kind of ease you in to a Sonic game. The massive plus side, and the second major addition in this game, and as I mentioned in the last video, is the inclusion of the Spin Dash. The Spin Dash, as stated before, is the best move ever added to Sonic's inventory of moves. It allows you to go fast instantaneously, and it really just helps you get through the level in a much more organic way. Another key difference between 1 and 2 would be the special stage and how you acquire access to the special stages. In the first game, 50 rings at the end got you a special stage. Now it's 50 rings at a check stand. This is both easier and harder to me. Sometimes it's really hard to keep those 50 rings to the very end, so having them sooner helps out a lot because you don't have to worry about losing all of your rings that you've been saving the entire level 3 seconds from the end, which definitely happened in both Sonic 1 and Sonic CD, and it drove you insane because there's no way to go back and get all those rings again unless you want to retread the entire level. So having the check stands be the special stage access helps out a lot with that. However, it also does shorten the amount of time you have to get those 50 rings to access the special stage. Also, you can run into these check stands a lot easier than you could hit the end of a level. So sometimes you would have 37 or 40 rings and you're saving up, and then you hit your check stand by accident, which is really frustrating because then you may or may not have another check stand by the end, and then you're kind of screwed and stuck. Yeah. These check stands also serve the purpose of a quick save. To go back to Tails for a little bit, Tails is a fun little side character who during the gameplay of the regular game doesn't really affect anything at all. He's more of just a fun little companion to have, and he's there for a critical story element at the end because he flies the tornado to the Death Egg, and he's the one where if you don't get all the Chaos Emeralds, saves Sonic the Hedgehog at the end of the game. But if not, I mean, kind of useless, but still there. He's a good companion. That's what I'm trying to say. However, and this is my biggest issue with Tails. Tails during the special stages can get a bit annoying. The issue is that he can collect rings as well. Perhaps I should backtrack a moment and comment on the special stage first before continuing. The special stage is very different from the first game. In the first game, it was still two-dimensional, and the controls were essentially the same, and you used the same sprite. In Sonic 2, it switches completely into a pseudo 3D tunnel run. It's essentially Sonic and Tails, or Tails, depending on who you're playing, running a straight line, trying to avoid obstacles and collect as many rings as you can in order to pass certain checkpoints that had ring requirements. This is the format that I see used most often in Sonic special stages from this point on. Sonic Heroes has a variation of this, Sonic 3D has a variation of this, as well as Knuckles Chaotix has a variation of this. My problem is that Tails can collect rings as well. Now granted, Tails' rings are his own, so when he loses them, he loses his own rings, but they are grouped in as a total. So when you're counting on Tails to keep his rings for the end, well, this happens.
Really? Jesus! Come on, really? Tails! Come on! Really? Come on! Tails!
Replaying this game with Sonic or Tails only was a lot easier. The next two levels, Chemical Plant Zone and Aquatic Ruin Zone, are very fun to play. They're very similar to the first game, where they're not super memorable or super out there as far as unique game design or something super bizarre or crazy that makes you like, wow, Chemical Plant Zone! But they're still really solid, well-constructed levels. There's a few new little mechanics that are introduced in Chemical and Ruins that just kind of help flesh out the Sonic gameplay. This, however, changes when we get into Casino Night Zone, quite possibly one of my favorite zones in any Sonic game ever. Although I will have to admit to a little bit of a bias on this one, because in Casino Night Zone is where my bias for Sonic music and my love for Sonic music really kind of shows itself. Casino Night Zone has one of my all-time favorite Sonic tracks. In fact, it's one of my favorite pieces of music from any video game I've ever played. Casino Night Zone, 5 stars. 10 out of 10, beautiful. The funny thing about Casino Night Zone is there's an aspect of it that I enjoy purely out of spite of another Sonic title. Sonic Spinball is a garbage heap. I know there are people that like it, but I can't stand that game. The mechanics are clunky, slow, and the aesthetic is overwhelmingly unpleasing. It feels dark and gross and like you're playing pinball in a sewer. So when I play Casino Night Zone, I can never help thinking to myself, see, look how easy this is. Sonic 2, the second Sonic game, well, actually technically the fourth, because Sonic 1 8-bit came out after Sonic 1 for the Genesis, and then it went Sonic 2 8-bit, and then it went Sonic 2, but anyway, the second mainstream Sonic game figured out pinball years before, so why can't Sonic Spinball get it right when it's perfect in Casino Night Zone? Enough harping about Sonic Spinball. Anyway, Casino Night Zone, in summation, it's fantastic, it's a lot of fun, does pinball fantastically, and I'm glad it exists. It's at this point in the game that I usually have acquired the ability of Super Sonic. Now, as stated in the last episode, Super Sonic is not acquirable until Sonic 2, when he gains all 7 Chaos Emeralds. Like with all new game mechanics, it usually takes a game or so to really figure out what works and what doesn't work about a new addition on how a game is played. Super Sonic is no different. He's really fast and really hard to control, obviously because he's super, but the thing that really makes Super Sonic annoying is that you only have to jump once to activate Super Sonic. Now, what's cool about Sonic 3 and Sonic Knuckles is that when you become Super, you have to double jump, so you can still play through the levels with 50 plus rings and not automatically turn supersonic. Because there are sections of the game that require you to do precise platforming under circumstances of certain doom if you miss the platform, being supersonic makes those ultimately harder, because Sonic, when in super form, is really squirrely. So there are often circumstances where you have 49 rings and you hope to God that you don't get that 50 ring, because it's gonna make your job so much more difficult and you probably will die. Now, after this point, you kind of see a trend. Sonic games aren't inherently original from game to game. They do borrow their mechanics a lot, which is fine. Most games and most sequels have the same kind of enemies and environmental hazards, just reskinned for a new game, and Sonic is no different. You see the same platforms, you see the same bad guys, just retooled a little bit to fit the new environment. The rest of the game plays out like this, with a few new additions. Mystic Cave has a bad guy you can't hit when he's flashing his little flasher, Metropolis has giant screws for elevators, and Sky Chase Zone has a game mechanic that I actually haven't seen outside of Sonic 2. Although I do worry for your little furry and flicky friends when you break them out of their badnik and they have to plummet to their demise way up there in the sky. I mean, not all of them fly. I mean, essentially, since there are little turtles coming out of the badnik turtles that you destroy way up in the atmosphere. I'm thinking too much about a 2D Sonic game from 1992. Introduction of Wing Fortress Zone. Tails gets shot down. He's dead. No, maybe. I don't know. He's probably not dead. Anyway, Wing Fortress Zone, Sonic has to go it alone. You're back as a solo hero. this zone is a lot of fun. Again, the supersonic perils are really frustrating, but the boss that I actually find to be one of the hardest bosses as a non-supersonic or regular Tails is really quite easy if you're supersonic. A little, actually, extra easy. As Dr. Robotnik escapes to the Death Egg from Wing Fortress Zone, Sonic holds on to a rocket as it blasts into the orbit of the planet. I'm, again, not gonna think too much about it. Somehow Sonic can breathe just fine, whatever. Maybe hedgehogs can breathe in space. We don't know. Have we ever sent a hedgehog up in space? We should test it. Anyway, remember in Sonic 1 when you had to defeat the final boss with 0 rings? Well, this time you get to defeat 2 final bosses with 0 rings, because Death Egg Zone starts out, well, as a zone, and whenever you start a zone, you have 0 rings. It's a little mean, I think, to have 2 final bosses. I mean, 1, yeah, it's hard, but it's doable. 2, it's still doable, but jeez, 2 final bosses to have to figure out all the kinks and all the patterns of, and hopefully have enough lives, or else you're gonna start from scratch. I mean from scratch, from 0 emeralds on the coast of Emerald Hill, beginning. Sonic enters his first fight against Mecha Sonic. Now here's where it gets a little funky. This is almost the first official complete robotic duplicate of Sonic, unless you count those bad nicks from Sonic 1 that look like Sonic when they roll into a ball and fall down the hill from Spring Yard Zone. I say almost because Sonic the Hedgehog 2 that came out for the Game Gear on an 8-bit system just prior to Sonic 2 had Silver Sonic, the technically first robotic version of Sonic the Hedgehog. Now what's interesting is that the robotic version of Sonic from Sonic 2 16-bit, so the main game that we're talking about now, is often nicknamed Silver Sonic. This is not originally the case. The moniker Silver Sonic technically belongs to the 8-bit version of the robotic Sonic from the 8-bit version of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. In the Japanese manual of Sonic 2, this robotic Sonic is known as Mecha Sonic, although not the same Mecha Sonic from Sonic & Knuckles. This Sonic gets its Silver Sonic nickname from Archie Comics, which explains that the 8-bit version is merely a prototype of the 16-bit version. So, long story short, you can call it Silver Sonic and it's not technically wrong, but it's not technically called Silver Sonic, and this is a bunch of hubbub around pretty much nothing. But it's still kind of nice to know. It's also fun to note that the LEGO Dimensions version of this robotic Sonic is called Robo Sonic. So they just scrapped the Silver Sonic, scrapped the Mecha Sonic, they just went for a completely new title of Robo Sonic. All in all, if you're to take away anything from this, just take away that this Sonic and Metal Sonic from Sonic CD, completely different robot antagonists. Metal Sonic is a character that started from Sonic CD and has continued on till this day. But I'll get into him, obviously, in this Sonic CD video. To defeat this robotic version of Sonic, basically just watch and learn his moveset, and then just learn to predict what he's going to do next, as Dr. Robotnik watches you from a small hole in the back of the room, which is really weird, but hey ho, whatever. Defeat the robotic Sonic, and then you move on to the giant Eggman robot. Giant Robotnik robot. This fight would be a lot easier if you had just 1 ring. Honestly, if you were given 1 ring Just one ring. These fights would be so much easier. Any longtime veteran of Sonic games knows that you can masterfully defeat pretty much any Robotnik antagonist by juggling one ring. You defeat the big bad guy, and for some reason, according to game logic, defeating the big mech explodes the base for some reason. And then it cuts to what I want to call a cinematic, but I'm not really sure if it counts as a cinematic. But it's essentially the story of Tails and the Flickies that were saved by Sonic back down on the island, watching the base as it explodes, and then Tails takes off in the tornado and then runs to save Sonic. The music during this cinematic also ranks as one of my favorite Sonic music pieces as well. If you were good and got all the emeralds, Sonic turns super, thus kind of making Tails' daring rescue pointless. But if you didn't or played Tails through this playthrough, Sonic or Tails will rescue you because you can't fly because you're, not super. Also, as a side note, it's a little bit of a bummer that you don't get Super Tails in Sonic 2. So yay, the day is saved, Robotnik is defeated once more, and peace can now come to West Island. One fun final thing about this game is when Sonic and Knuckles came out, it came out as an adaptable cartridge, so you could plug in Sonic 3 to explore the full Sonic 3 and Knuckles gameplay, as that game was originally one game, but then it was cut into two for size purposes. But if you plug in Sonic 2 instead of Sonic 3, you get Knuckles in Sonic 2. This is a lot of fun. It's a little trickier because Knuckles can't jump as high as Sonic or Tails, making it a little more difficult than it was originally intended to be, but then again, Knuckles was always supposed to be the more difficult playthrough of a Sonic game anyway. Also, I forgot to mention, you can't fly if you're playing as Tails. I don't know why, but you can't fly. I guess they just didn't program it into Sonic 2. It's in Sonic 3, so it's a gameplay mechanic they added in Sonic 3, but it's kind of a bummer to watch Tails fly around when you're playing Sonic and Tails, and then when you play Tails, you can't fly. It's a little disappointing, but there it is. All in all, this is a vast improvement over Sonic 1. Not to say Sonic 1 is bad, but Sonic 2, if I had to pick between the two of them, I would definitely rank Sonic 2 as the better game, simply because they've worked out all the kinks of Sonic 1. With the inclusion of the spin dash, the upgraded graphics, the honestly improved music. I do like the music in Sonic 2 more than Sonic 1. The added character, the cinematic at the end. All in all, as a package, I do believe Sonic 2 is just a better game than Sonic 1, and for me, it's more enjoyable. But let me know what you think. Tell me what you thought about Sonic 2. Tell me what you thought about Sonic 1. Mention something fun in the comments. I'll see if I can't get around to it in the next video. Other than that, it's time for me to end this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you like what I've made. And we'll see you next time for some more Draw-Thru.